Good morning, everyone. A very warm welcome to Cranfield, and we're delighted to host the event. It's not the first time, and quite a few people in the room who've listened to my ranting and raving in the past. At the same time, I was just thinking, what am I going to tell all this audience? So that's why I have my co-presenter with me. I'm delighted and proud that Jenni will join me to share her experience and what she's done, a very hard work to achieve this qualification, and that was her part of MSc thesis as well. So I've also got Jelle in the audience who's done similar work, it's with a slightly different data set. So I've got about probably 70 slides, Jenni's got about 6. So a lot of, Andy was just saying lots of subliminal messages, quick slides, but I just start off. So I've got a couple of glorified titles, but I've also got a disclaimer down at the bottom, and anything I'll say will be my own views in case anything I say will be controversial or whatever. So let me just kick off. So this is our agenda. So we're going to start I'm going to set the scene with a sort of safety performance of the industry to start with. And let me just take you through this. So this is from the DFT website, and the question is sort of how safe are we? Obviously it's referring to sort of casualties in UK registered aircraft in UK airspace. When you actually frame it differently, you might get a different answer, but ultimately we're good. So take a look at the sort of commercial air transport accidents, and this is literally, there's nothing to talk about, right? So in terms of fatalities, these are extremely good. But when you actually look at the general aviation, which will not be the focus of this presentation, and we've got some regular sort of accidents happening, keep occurring, and fatalities as well. It's varying degree, year after year, but we're not as good as. And that's a well-known fact. That's nothing new, probably you didn't know before. And this is from ICAO Safety 2018 report, and it's trying to give you a sort of number of fatal accidents and fatalities, and also trying to normalise them, the actual rates as well. So the point I would just draw your attention here, it says that 2016 is actually lower rate than 2017, but I've got another slide coming in a minute, maybe I'll come back to that. So, to start with, I've got a series of sort of what's happened within the last few years, but initially, this was actually an opening screen of one of these whiteboard video clips. We created, John Vincent is somewhere in the audience, in EASA days, and this was the opening screen, probably one of his presentations. Actually, that's how far we've come, right? Starting from the early days of aviation and up to 2010, we hit a plateau, but that is the success that we achieved. And those of you working day in, day out, very hard in the industry, and that's your hard work. But what happened since 2010? Again, if you look at, these are actually the data that I did a bit of number crunching from Flight Safety Foundation supported Aviation Safety Network database, which you all can access, and the varying degree of number of fatal and non-fatal accidents, and also the fatalities. There's a downward trend in terms of, but the actual accident numbers are not changing much. You may argue that actually I'm not normalising them based on traffic, because at the same time the traffic is going sometimes some regions even exponentially. But suddenly we hit this sort of 2014, a high number of fatalities, quite a big number, and you can argue whether they were accidents or not. Any idea what events, 2014?
Malaysia.
Exactly. And also we ended up in 2015, still quite a good number, I should say this, but high number of sort of fatalities is anything in Europe? German wings, yeah. So if I came to you, given a presentation like this in 2013, and I said, I've got a crystal ball, and next year we're going to have a 2 wide-body, same aircraft type, same airline, different parts of the region, very high number of fatalities, you would call me that you're barking mad. And if I'd said to you in 2014 that next year we're going to have a pilot suicidal in Europe, again, you wouldn't believe me. Would you? Would you? So I think that's the challenge. And Nassim Taleb's definition of black swan is the 3 aspects, 3 characteristics. First, it's an outlier. Nothing in the past convincingly telling us that it can happen. Secondly, it has a severe extreme impact, which all those three events are, made some changes in the industry. And thirdly, human nature makes concoct explanations to make it explainable and predictable afterwards. This is exactly a sort of hindsight bias, isn't it? After the event, we go back into databases, dig deep, and actually said, this was the evidence, how come we didn't see it? Well, at the time, our challenge is actually to convince the actual key decision makers and say, here's a bit of evidence, and it's coming. But then again, it's all about prioritization. So, what happened then afterwards, 2016, we ended up with sort of even downward trend again, 315. And 2017, my earlier thing about the sort of rates, even we had a lower rate of accidents, we actually, higher rate of accidents here, 2017, we had the best year ever. Right, 2017, best year ever. 4.some billion people carried, and we also only ended up less than 100 fatalities. It's remarkable, remarkable safety performance. There's no doubt about that. And suddenly we ended up with 2018 going back to a very high number of fatalities again. And let me take you through this. This is what I did last year, data set again, 2018 events. And if you look at give any data set to any of you, probably will come up with a different outcome. And these are the events included, these are the events excluded, and it's also sort of the aircraft types and so on. So the key message is 1 out of 5 accidents were fatal, roughly. 1 out of 5. It's only 12. It's still very remarkable. All those millions of flights, it's still sort of 12 fatal accidents. It's not an eye test. And this is the entire accidents in commercial air transport. The key thing is, basically we ended up with the top repeating events is the runway excursions, and then the second one is the loss of control, 10 events. And if you look at the fatalities, this number changes. It's still the sort of loss of control events causing the high fatalities, despite the fact that runway excursions are actually more frequent events. Nothing new. That's a repeating theme for some years, isn't it? And I listed them, and again, we wouldn't have time to talk about them. What sort of struck me as I was looking at, what would I say about this slide? Should I exclude it? Well, what drew my attention is this actually, the ICAO type designator, is the wake turbulence category, the way that the aircraft types are categorized. And if you look at this, all those fatal accidents were actually medium category. In other words, in 2018, there were no large category fatal accidents. No A330s, no 777s, A380s, and so on. Interesting. You may argue that because there's more of medium category aircraft out there operating, but anyway. And I was also literally coding them myself, so sort of looking at the airworthiness aspects, what these accidents. Again, repeating theme, runway excursions versus loss of controls. And the loss of control accidents related to airworthiness in 2018 caused about 260 fatalities in 3 accidents. But then the runway excursion, and this very last one is the unfortunate Southwest flight. Uncontained fan-related failure. And I wouldn't go through all of them, but these are all to share with you for you to look at, explore afterwards. I created this kind of mind map in 3 themes, and basically these were the themes, and I call them sort of causal or contributory factors that for each theme, for each event, and obviously these were the starting point, going backwards. Interesting thing is that the way that I call them, like airframe systems related events, whether it's about pitot-static systems or an angle of attack sensor or whatever it may be, or it could be hydraulic system, and those were the high number of fatalities. Okay, before I close this part of the presentation, I'd like to share the ultimate question of, are we learning? Are we having these sort of repeating events? So, I'm not promoting the book, you probably know it and you've got it. And so, the concept says, beyond 10 to the minus 6 or better, the next accident has never been seen before. Because we're getting better and better and better, Don't shoot the messenger. That's just one argument. The next accident is decomposition may invoke a series of already seen micro-incidents, although most have been deemed inconsequential for safety. And this is our challenge. In some cases, we can actually look at them and we can try to put an argument, but it will be very difficult to convince people. And at the same time, I know this is generic, only not focusing on purely aviation. In 25th anniversary of Piper Alpha, at the time, the chair of the HSC, Judith Hackett, actually said this, quoting various accidents, big, large organizational accidents, and he says, precise circumstances and context of these incidents differ in some respect, but feeling that there are no new accidents, all accidents with new people. So if you put that into a sort of context, some people argue purely this, other people argue that, right? So, I don't know, many of you probably already heard, understand and fully appreciate the concept of safety 1 and 2. And I said not all, because we're not rejecting, it would be foolish, stupid and naive not to try to learn lessons from past events. Otherwise we would be crucified by media, judiciary and travelling public. But at the same time, as we got better and better, we lose the opportunity to learn lessons. And that's why the idea is we need to literally focus on what went right, continue sharing data, and that's what events like this, and also day-to-day activity of sharing data, intelligence, and so on. So, a few things about sort of European approach to safety risk management. I'm delighted that I've been involved in ECAS for the last 7-8 years in the early days, and then now the continuation of that work is EASA is just using the collaborative analysis groups in various domains. Andy is actually representing IFA in the human factors one, and we're also representing, I'm actually going tonight to the Cologne for the Commercial Air Transport Collaborative Analysis Group. Take a look at what EASA does in terms of European-wide activity of managing risk. So they publish regularly every year 3 key documents. The first one is safety review. They do the number crunching and actually they share it year after year. It tells you what happened, tells you very little about why it happened. And then the next one is the European Plan for Aviation Safety, what to do about it, how we're going to do things and improve and mitigate those risks. And it's a 4-year rolling plan, and then this is the way that we actually say, are we going to make rules, how are we going to do them, how long it's going to take, and also what kind of promotional activity we're going to do. Okay, so that's a sort of very simplistic view of looking at it, but it's good. And it's a sort of at least closing the circuit. So the identification of issues and the assessment of them, that's what we do in CAGs. And then further on, it actually goes up to some key decision makers in the committee. I know some people in the room are actually representing their associations, their organisations at very high level, decision-making process and so on. And so that's why we kind of started, and as we sort of always look for opportunity to trying to make impact, and I said, look, the students said, what am I going to do with my research projects? And that's the whole thing started, really. And we said, look, okay, maybe we can actually use some of the data sets from the regulators and from EASA, from the European Central Repository. And in Jenni's case, she actually used the public data anyway. But that was the reasoning behind it. And this aircraft maintenance box in the safety risk portfolio kept appearing in the annual safety reviews for year after year. And every time I went to these meetings, I said, look, John Franklin, I said, John, we need to open this box. It's a Pandora's box. We really need to understand what's in it. Because you keep saying, these are the numbers in terms of accidents and incidents and occurrences, but we really need to understand aircraft maintenance is not a safety issue, it's a domain. And saying all this, actually, I use a video clip from James Rees in the early 2000s. It says, aircraft maintenance is a hazard. Which is true to a degree. It's a hazardous activity, but nevertheless, we need to really understand it deeper. And so this was a very busy representation of the actual safety risk portfolio, but if you take the other stuff, unrelevant stuff out of it, it's exactly said, the 7 events, non-fatal, They all either cause loss of controls. Basically, the data set was also 2006 to 2017. They look at backwards last 10 years. And that was the reasoning, and said, okay, we need to maybe do something about that. So that's why we said maybe we can focus on this, and I'm going to hand over to Jenni in a minute, but before I do that, what Jenni did, Jenni actually used publicly available data, various data, credible data sources, and Skybury and Aviation Safety Network, and then obviously she then found some accident reports, literally go through them. And also Jelle is with us, and we received this data set from European Central Repository, and then they both created their own taxonomies rather than trying to use an HFAX or ADREP or ECAS or whatever. And maybe they can tell you a bit more. If you're interested, please go and have a chat. So, basically, let's just go through this. That's Jelle's work. It's sort of safety issues in MRO, derived from ECI incident data. At level 1, Jelle actually looked at it, his taxonomy structure was very much sort of process-based, but then at level 2, it ended up with 67 different levels. And there's nothing new here. We've been talking about sort of installation as probably the last 20, 30 years. And maintenance control issues, again, various aspects of it, and job close-ups and things like that. And now I hand over to Jenni, and she's going to take you through what she's done in terms of how she tackled the challenge. Thank you, Jenni.
Hi, so as Cengiz mentioned, I'm Jenni Insley. I recently did the MSc Safety and Human Factors in Aviation at Cranfield, just finished in September last year, so it's good to be back. So I'm just going to talk through the research that I carried out as part of my thesis. You can see a brief snippet of my thesis up there. So the reason why we chose this area to look at was, as Cengiz alluded to earlier, in the EASA annual safety reviews, they've always mentioned that aircraft maintenance is in the safety risk portfolio, but it's that sort of unopened box. So the idea was to open the unopened box and sort of provide maintenance organisations with maybe a bit more insight into where they can look to improve. So what I did was I looked at CAT category aeroplanes and the publicly available data, so Aviation Safety Network Accident Database and Skybury's Accidents and Incidents Database. And then I got the official investigation reports for each of those occurrences to sort of validate the data that was in those databases. And I looked at a period of 15 years from 2003 to 2017, so if you're wondering why 2018 is missing, well, it's because I did my thesis in 2018, so obviously all the data wasn't available then. And as Cengiz mentioned, I created my own taxonomy, and there were a number of reasons for that. So I initially looked at, could I maybe use HFAX-NE, MEDA, or ADREP? But what I found was doing a retrospective analysis like this, it was quite difficult if you didn't have all the detail in the data, which quite often you didn't. So I decided that it was best to make my own taxonomy. So this taxonomy was a 3-level structure. So I started off with the first level, which was a very basic, what was the occurrence? So of the 112 occurrences that I had, each one of those was given one occurrence consequence coding. At the second level, I looked at what was the system or component associated to the event. And then a third level was where more of the detail was from the accident and incident reports. What were the maintenance contributing factors? So if we look at the level 1 occurrences, you see that the top sort of 3 were runway related, diversion or air turn back, or collision. And these sort of align with CAA Significant 7, as well as the key risk areas identified by EASA in the annual safety reviews. If we then look into a bit more detail, what was the system or component involved in those occurrences, you can see quite a large proportion related to engine and landing gear. And then in the more detailed level, this is just sort of a very top level of some of the higher, so I had sort of like a 2-tier hierarchy as part of my level 3, because obviously there's a lot more detail. So this is just a very top level coding, and then within that there was many more codings. So you can see inadequate maintenance, incorrect maintenance and inspection are sort of the top 3 amongst those occurrences. Within inadequate maintenance we had things like procedures, non-airworthy components released into service, and parts or latch not being secured. In incorrect maintenance, things like incorrect installation, again procedures and incorrect adjustment of parts. And in inspection, things like not identifying a defect, insufficient inspection for the requirements, or not undertaking an inspection when required were amongst the top 3. So one thing you might notice there is human factors, which is in the purple down the bottom, and it's got 3 codings amongst a set of 112 occurrences. I thought that was sort of a key point to highlight, is whilst human factors may be sort of implicitly referred to within the accident or incident reports, it's sort of rarely explicitly attributed as a key factor within maintenance. So then what I did with all of these codings was sort of had a bit of a brainstorm of how can I maybe represent these in a concise way without just giving loads of figures with numbers in, which aren't very nice to read. So what I did was I came up with these charts. I think maybe to begin with they don't look that straightforward, but so on the x-axis we've got the number of occurrences, on the y-axis is the number of fatalities, and then the diameter of each of the sort of bubbles is the number of occurrences with fatalities. So the reason for this was sort of to spark a bit of thinking about how can we prioritise what we're looking at. So do we look at events with a high number of occurrences, high number of fatalities, or is it sort of a combination of all of those? So when we looked at level 1, so the fatal accident relationship, you can see quite clearly, I think, that collisions got a reasonably high number of occurrences, the highest number of fatalities, and also has the highest number of occurrences with fatalities. Then looking at level 2, once again, sort of engine-related occurrences seem to be the dominating message there. So they've got the highest number of occurrences, highest number of fatalities, and they've also got quite a high number of occurrences with fatalities as well. And then finally, for the more detailed level 3 codings, I just gave a top 9 because obviously it's quite a lot. And again, inadequate maintenance procedures, operator oversight, they're sort of the initial striking, dominating codes there.
Thank you, Jenny. Really appreciate that. So if you're really interested, we can share the document, we can share the data, and it's all Jenny's hard work and Jelle's. Please go and talk to them during the breaks. And but we, it's all about learning. And in fact, please do scrutinise them. Probably they don't want to hear that, but any data analysis will end up with, and there's always some even contradicting outputs, like even what comes out of ICAO sometimes doesn't exactly match with the EASA. 9 times out of 10, 99 times 100 will do. But anyway, so what came out of these 2 projects, basically, first of all, even the accident data, but particularly the occurrence data, big issues about data quality. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be overly critical, but the first thing to solve a problem is to recognise that there is one. So that's why I actually posed the question that will 376/2014 make a difference? I hope so. We hope so. But in reality, it will take time. So we can't just sit back for another 5-10 years and say, oh, let's get a sort of higher data quality. And so we need to recognise that. And secondly, the lack of HF and human performance analysis in the occurrences, but even the accident data, if you look at them, there's hardly any. And I totally recognise we actually train, it's one of our flagship courses, and that sounds like a salespeople. We do work and we do train together with AAIB and other colleagues. We train accident investigators, and they have challenges in terms of constraints and time and everything else. But there's hardly any HF analysis in accident reports. and occurrence reports even done, let's not go there. Or maybe it is the case for occurrence reports, actually people do it but not share it. Then are we learning? How can we learn without sharing it? Anyway, so very, very briefly, what we're doing within IFA. IFA is an NGO, just like UK Flight Safety Committee, I'm involved, and it's a 40+ year organisation. So that was phase 1. So what we then did in phase 2, we literally went around the world and did a bit of globe trotting and collected some data from various workshops in various events. And we presented this analysis with 4 key questions to people. We collected some data by online polling tools and this and the other. And actually, that was phase 2. So what I'm trying to do in phase 3, I thought they'd be naive to try to publish something, go back to EASA, CAA and the ICAO and say, this is exactly what we've done, but they might just say, well, did you actually speak to the senior key, what I call them, risk owners, key risk decision makers? So at the moment, I'm literally going through, no more than 30 minutes, 5 key questions and interviewing CAMO and AMO post holders. Large airlines mainly, and big organisations, but I'm happy to talk to anyone. So these were the 4 key questions that we asked people, and it was events in Dallas, quite a wide range of people across the world in various events, and training sessions and so on. And we first just asked them the questions sort of without telling them anything, but not to create a bias, and say, what do you think the most significant issue is, most significant risk in the system is? And then we literally told them what came out of 2 individual studies, and we asked people to rank them, because that's another challenge. Any data analysis will end up with some kind of frequency numbers and this and that and rate numbers and this and that, but actually somebody has to apply a judgment and say, I don't care what the number is, but this is the issue. So what we did is ask people, out of Jelle's studies, these were the sort of top 5, I think that's what we did. And what interesting for me was, people came up with different answers. And I reckon it's because they're based on their background and their old sort of engineering expertise and so on. That's inevitable. And in the case of Jenni's, this time, we actually, if you look back, these are the coding that she used in the bubble charts that, we just said to people, we explained them how the bubble chart, what they're trying to present. And I know it's a bit complex, but you need to sort of digest a little bit. But we said, look, what do you think about these? So in my view, they actually chose, and you can question that again, how they responded, but high fatalities. They were trying to focus on high fatalities. And that's $1 million question. Because we can go and just say, only focus on, put all our effort into high fatal accidents, but actually, we might be missing the trick. Next black swan might come from a non-fatal accident. Anyway, that was the key point. So what came out of these workshops, what actually people said qualitatively, and this is just a brief summary, and installation errors, we've talked about it, it's been going on for decades. Are we learning? I don't want to be too negative. I think we are learning, because we're not causing fatalities like we did in before 2000s, but at the same time they keep appearing. Personnel shortage is a big thing all across the world, despite the ICAO and GAP and all kinds of other initiatives. And people see it as a safety risk as well as business risk. And new technology inevitably bringing complexity, new products, much more integrated, sophisticated. And actually, how do we train people? How effective that training is, how well they understand the actual product that they're dealing with. We keep hearing about in the flight data, like what's it doing it again, and probably maintenance engineers are talking the same language now. And the very final one is the big one, commercial pressure. Things like EC261 and all kinds of other stuff. And sometimes it's actually self-induced or peer pressure, sometimes coming from the management. And the close-off is basically, there's a bit of promotion, but some of you are already aware. The FAA has also done some new initiatives and new training packages. And the bit I like about it, I'm critical, but the bit that I like about it, they're not only pointing the fingers to the end user and say they're not following procedures, they're actually looking at it holistically. What are designers doing about it? What are tech authors doing about it? So they're trying to get every stakeholder engaged and actually If people are not following procedures, why aren't they following procedures? Is it because we're not designing them good enough? And this is my pitch. If you're interested in the room, as a sort of, if you think that you're involved in the key risk decision making in your own organisations, please do consider, get in touch. 5 questions. I'm not going to put you on spot. I can share the questions in advance. You can think, and then just a sort of short interview so that we can capture that data. And I've already talked to some key UK airline representatives as well. And I think that's it. I don't know how well we've done. Usually I've run out of time terribly. Did I leave anything? But thanks so much. Thank you for your attention. I hope that was setting the scene for the day. And I'm really, really looking forward to listening to other speakers. Thank you. Thank you, Jenny, as well.